talking with McCrossan from Visceral Business in the course of my interview series on the state of the digital workplace adoption and the digital transformation within the enterprises in the UK. But first of all, I'm happy to have you with me on this online recording for this interview series, but can you please introduce yourself first?
Thank you, Bjorn, and it's good to be part of this series. So my name is McCrossan. I've been running Visceral Business for 8 years. Visceral Business looks at integrated digital strategy across organisations, playing to the nature of the organisations themselves. It's about this shift, as we call it, about towards digital transformation, but really the end game of that, which is vital, dynamic, connected organisations using data as a lifeblood and the skills of people and technology combined to improve business performance and business opportunities. That's the pitch. We work with a range of organisations across public sector and private sector and not-for-profit.
So what is your perception on the adoption of this digital workplace as a technological framework for enabling a new kind of working and also the digital transformation within the UK especially?
Within the UK especially, okay. So it's interesting. I was thinking about this morning, talking with somebody online about Future Fest and the horizon scanning that is going on. And actually, I think my perception is that perhaps it's because Visceral Business is 8 years old, that the path towards digital transformation has been quite slow. We talk about mission creep. I think this is a case in point. Digital transformation has proved difficult, I think, for many organisations because they tend to revert to the default settings, which are the legacy systems that they have with them. And I think there's a real challenge. There's a knack to bringing the provenance, the heritage of existing organisations into the digital domain from the very fundamentals around business modelling. They don't think about startups. They don't think about starting up business opportunities in the way a startup would do. And therefore there is, I think, a sort of a more mindful and more detailed approach that we could be taking with digital business that we're perhaps yet to take. And particular in that, I think, is understanding the ways that various organisations in specific sectors work, because it isn't a case of one size fits all with digital strategy. I think it's very much a case of understanding the behaviours on a sector by sector basis. Your food experience is different from your travel or your leisure experiences. And I would like to see a lot more conversation beyond generic Enterprise 2.0 into the types of systems and technological solutions and digital strategies that can help these businesses adopt digital transformation more readily.
Have I understood it right? So that you mentioned the missing link was the digital mindset, which is not equally distributed within the corporate culture that hinders a lot of companies in going forward with digital transformation, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it does come down to skill and from the understanding of what digital engagement is about. It's about direct immersion and not about management from above and beyond. So for decision makers who are by very definition used to making decisions, that iterative design understanding and insight that you get from digital strategy is something that many of them have yet to fully embrace because they're not doing it themselves. And I think, yes, the skills lag is creating a lot of the resistance, as we're finding it, to digital transformations being as effective as they could be.
But then also as a consequence, you should request for more digital role modeling from the management to learn to use this, also to appreciate these digital mindset and then also work together with the teams on this.
Absolutely. There's a lot of connections that are very powerful within this shift. So, for example, the connection between comms and marketing and HR, I see that as a particularly powerful axis to develop that sometimes is perhaps overlooked. A ditto with things like IT and the service design areas. Those two things work very much more closely than they used to. And so if we can forge those relationships, if we can look at integrated strategies across those sorts of areas, or policy development and online interaction and data, those are the sorts of areas I think where we can make a lot of mileage.
So besides the role modeling, there's also a lot of talk, especially we are planning also a lot of talk at our upcoming Enterprise Digital Summit about the digital enablement of the workforce. So what are your recommendations on how to enable people and certainly also follow this new digital mindset, but then also changing their working habits?
Well, do you remember, Bjorn, back in the day, you know, when we were talking about Twitter and Facebook as being relatively new on the scene, a lot of the time people were, you know, were sort of recognizing that the big new difference was that we were doing a lot more listening than talking, that social media gave us that listening capability. I think the first thing I would put into organizations and have done is this sense of the feedback loop. So in order to get the skills to develop those and to create this sort of cultural shift, a big part of it for me is introducing more of a sense of feedback about what is happening, how are we organizing, how are things happening across the organization, and therefore what do we need to do? Because I don't think it's just as simple as going, I know, I'll go on a course. This is about people really engaged as digitally involved employees or contractors or as part of the network. So understanding things like linked data, for example, it's not just about understanding the data, it's understanding about how you might model a business differently with it as part of the repertoire. And by showing through information what is happening where, being a bit more open about the dynamics that are happening across a business, we can start to get more involvement and also more readiness to adopt new skills. And we always look for the champions in that. There are always people who are the more progressives who will latch onto this stuff more early and help accelerate the learning. But that's what we want to get into, this period of accelerated learning and accelerated development, because it is possible with digital strategy.
So if you look in, try to have a look into the glass bowl of the future. So what are your predictions on how long it will take also for, especially also for the UK, with all the things also, certainly government programs like Go Digital, but then also other economic developments on turning towards this digital way?
A couple of areas, I think, within that sort of sector-specific space. The relationships between startups and larger organizations are a sweet spot. It's very interesting to see what's happening to disrupt and also to create some sort of continuity around those core services, things like transport or retail or health, for example. That's where we need to be shining the spotlight. And also sort of added to that and slightly differently alongside it is this sense of ecosystem data. I mean, we talk a lot about smart cities, that's the buzzword. A smart city is an ecosystem. There are others as well. So, for example, I've been working with the Food Standards Agency recently looking at the regulation and compliance of an entire food chain from farm to fork, thinking about how we can aggregate ecosystem data from various partners, collaborators as an ecosystem. Or in Cornwall, where I'm the lead for the Open Data Institute in Cornwall, you know, we can use open data to think about things like marine health and sustainable energy and sustainable economics in an age of devolution and Brexit, you know, from an ecosystem perspective. So big data is great. I think really the win is going to come from organisations working together to think about the future framework for their sector and how services are supplied against the new needs which we're finding, the new opportunities that we're getting from things like artificial intelligence and macroeconomic data. And also this sort of sense of, well, how can we develop an ecosystem against the vision or against goals a little bit more predictably using the data that we have.
Great. Thank you for these exciting answers and thank you for the interview.
Pleasure. It's lovely to be part of this, Bjorn.